estate planning and tax planning, two topics we've been spending a lot of time with clients on lately, and there's a couple of really good reasons for that. One is there have been a lot of rule changes that impact tax planning, and number two is there are also a certain set of rules that we call the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that is set to sunset at the end of 2025, therefore reverting to old rules starting in 2026. This has implications not only for your income tax, but a significant potential cliff in terms of estate tax. And it deals with the exemption amount that's applicable for those folks that have accumulated fairly substantial estates. And it requires some advanced planning, potentially, if this really comes to fruition. So, Amy, let's talk a little bit about, what we're talking about here in terms of the setback that potentially occurs. And then we can talk about some strategies that people could start to consider.
So currently, each of us can leave almost $13 million worth of assets either during our lifetime or at our death without paying any gift or estate tax. That's a pretty big amount. Now, beginning in 2026, if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sunsets as it's scheduled to be, what's going to happen is that exemption amount is going to get cut roughly in half. So it might be closer to $6 to $7 million at that point. So yes, for clients that have accumulated some significant wealth, that can be a really big deal.
In the setback from, almost 13, and we're going to head back to probably 6-ish in that ballpark. So significantly more people would then be subject to the potential to pay estate tax, right? So now we start to think about, well, what are some strategies that we could put in place now to potentially get ahead of this issue, right? So one of the ways that we think about that is there a technique by which we could lock in this higher exemption amount that's currently in place? And there is one possibility we could consider.
There is. It is called a Spousal Lifetime Access Trust. It's also affectionately known as a SLAT. That's the acronym. And what it is, it's a way to use some of that large exemption amount that we have right now by making gifts today, but still giving some flexibility to our planning.
So the gift locks in the exemption amount because we made that gift now. We would file the appropriate gift tax return to memorialize this in the eyes of the IRS. And the way that this can be really beneficial is between married spouses.
That's right. So let's assume, for example, Mark, that we're married. What I can do is I can set up a trust, an irrevocable trust. I can make a large gift up to that roughly $13 million exemption if I really wanted to, and put it into that trust where you, in fact, can be one of the beneficiaries of the trust. So what I've done is I've locked in that exemption amount today, made the gift, but still given us some flexibility because you have the ability to have some level of access over those assets.
So I can potentially use the assets or the income and maintain my lifestyle and, for my health and maintenance and wealth and those sorts of things.
You can. Now, keep in mind what we're trying to do is we're trying to get assets out of our estate. So we're probably going to want to use our other bucket of assets that would otherwise be subject to tax. But you're right. If we need to, you can tap into that SLAT.
Most beneficial if I don't need to use that money, because then we've transferred that all and it stays inside that trust and hopefully grows from this point forward, right? And the true benefit is the fact that we have utilized the high exemption amount to make that gift into the trust now while that is still in place.
Yes, and the benefit, you mentioned married couples. You can actually set one of those up for me so that I also have that access. We don't know what life's going to bring. We don't know who's going to die first. So having each spouse have that level of access can be beneficial. And you have to be real careful. Like the IRS wants to make sure you follow certain formalities and don't make it too similar. But certainly with really careful planning, that can be done.
A perfect example of the types of in-depth planning that we're doing with that segment of clients where the estate and the financial issues and the tax issues reach a certain degree of complexity where we need to surround them with a team that can execute on these types of advanced strategies.